New data showing retail sales declining more than expected. Sales fell 1% in March. It was actually the second straight month of declines. Meanwhile, consumer sentiment out of the University of Michigan ticking up in April, increasing more than anticipated despite pessimism over inflation. Well, joining us now is Chris Graja, Argus Research Retail Analyst, to break some of this down. Good to see you here. So, as we look at what we're seeing with high-end versus lower-end spending, how are people pulling back when you really try and distinguish?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you an example from walking through a Walmart supercenter this week. The first thing you see in Action Alley as you go in the door are rice, beans, flour, cooking oil, pasta in cans. I mean, things that are really designed to help the folks who aren't making as much to make ends meet. Whereas, as you pointed out, the folks who are a bit more affluent aren't feeling the pinch of higher grocery prices to the same very acute degree.
Yeah, Andy Jassy spoke a bit about this yesterday following the release of that shareholder letter, saying consumers are much more careful about what they're spending on. They are trying to save money wherever they can, very deal conscious. How do you expect that to play out in this earnings season?
Well, I mean, the one thing that's important to know is for a lot of the retailers, their fiscal quarter is February, March, April. So we still have one more month, but I think the trends we've been talking about and you've probably been seeing are the same. And one of the very important ones is that, people have put spending for themselves a little bit on the back burner. So they're taking care of their kids, they're taking care of their partner, they're taking care of their pets, and then they're thinking really hard about how much money they're going to spend on themselves. So, as we work through the year, I think we'll see good spending on appointment type events, Mother's Day, Father's Day, back to school. But in those lulls in between, I think people will be pretty cautious in terms of what they spend on.
And I want to hone in on what we're seeing with the luxury market, because obviously we shouldn't always just assume that it's only those who can afford it who are buying this. We're seeing what's happening with credit card debt, but you're also having some of these aspirational shoppers also contributing to what we're seeing with luxury sales.
Well, right. And I think the aspirational shopper is probably the most vulnerable. I mean, they're the person who's maybe not truly rich, but they like carrying a high-end handbag or wearing some designer clothes or maybe a nice watch. I mean, I think that group, in the absence of stimulus payments, tax returns, the average tax return is down about 10% this year. So I think those people, when they don't have cash in pocket and they're thinking about putting it on a credit card that's now got a higher rate, I think some of them may have to think twice as they go forward. But the people who are, truly affluent and buying luxury brands, I think some of what they're thinking about is newness for their closets, things that people don't have, and maybe enjoying the fact that they're traveling more. One of the unique things I saw is that for years there was always a bus of Chinese tourists that went down Nassau Street in Princeton, probably visiting high-end colleges. I mean, I hadn't seen those buses since the beginning of the pandemic. I saw another one. So if that's anecdotal, but if that's an indication that wealthy, international travelers are traveling and coming back to the U.S., that could be a very good sign for luxury sales.
Indeed, it could. And we got a lot of talk about LVMH yesterday, 17% up on sales as they near $500 billion in market cap, and Bernard Arnault widens his gap as the world's richest man. But an interesting bit from the call came as management talked about the U.S. business. Their CFO, Jean-Jacques Guyani, saying that outside of Sephora, the rest of the U.S. business is, quote, slowing down a bit, and adding maybe interest rate rises are taking their toll on spending. Do you expect that we'll see a bit of softening moving forward, even from the luxury end?
Yeah, I mean, I don't cover LVMH particularly, but certainly over my career, I've covered Saks, and I mean, one of the things that we saw when I was covering Saks, day to day during their successful turnaround, I'll go back to the newness. A lot of people, weren't necessarily buying things that they had in their closets. They weren't buying suits or sweaters or a lot of those things. And then the other thing that we saw as things slowed down a little bit, as people remained very loyal to their brands, somebody who saw themselves as an LV shopper or a Ralph Lauren polo shopper or an Hermes shopper wanted to stick with those brands, but in some cases they didn't buy as many units, and there were a few cases as the Great Recession aged that some of the manufacturers offered some lower priced items in their line in order to kind of maintain that connection with their core important shoppers.
And you raise an interesting point when it comes to brand loyalty and where people have chosen to sort of trade down in certain aspects. What are some of the standouts that you're seeing in your research?
I mean, across the board, I cover a really wide range of companies. So one of the trade downs that's on a much more basic level is at grocery stores. I mean, Kroger has called out strength in their own store brands. So people are going to the grocery store and electing to save money by buying Kroger brands rather than some of the name brand merchandise. One of the places where people have been willing to step up, I just wrote a note on Mondelez, which owns a lot Oreos and a lot of other consumer brands, Cadbury. And what they're seeing is that a lot of people are willing to stick with their affordable luxuries. So, if people may be worrying about their money, but they're still making room for, things like their little bit of Cadbury chocolate each week that kind of makes them happy and that they can, hang on to that spending even though things get a little bit tougher.
That certainly makes its way frequently into my basket. I do appreciate you joining us this afternoon. Chris Graja, thank you so much.